Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Dearborn, Michigan, which is the largest Arab American population in America. Has obviously been talked about quite a bit this year as far as the ongoing genocide in Gaza and the kind of electoral significance of Dearborn in Michigan. 100,000 Michiganders, many of them in Dearborn, voted uncommitted during the Michigan primary, and I'm delighted to have Abdel. You're a local Palestinian-American writer. You've been published in The Hill, a couple other places, and you've been writing for months about the carnage going on. And before we get to the electoral stuff, I want to just ask, just from a human perspective, I mean, how is this community faring mentally? I mean, I just saw, before I got here, a gruesome image of a Palestinian mother in Gaza, like watching helplessly as her child was literally burning alive in a fire due to Israeli bombs.
It's taken a massive mental strain on the community. We all feel it. Even if you're not Palestinian, Palestine is woven into the very fabric of the city and into the spirit and minds of Arab and Muslim Americans here. So when one of us perishes in this war, in a way it feels as if a piece of them has died as well. But also many people in this community are bereaved because they have lost family members in Gaza. Or even in the West Bank, where there's scores of settler terrorism occurring, kicking Palestinians off of their land, killing them, burning agriculture. And of course, those actions have reverberated here within Michigan, as you have alluded to. It is really, I think, the heartbeat of the Arab and Muslim kind of community here in the United States. We're doing our best. Not only is the carnage in Gaza having a big impact on us mentally, but there's also been massive political repression against peaceful anti-war, pro-Palestine activists who have partaken in peaceful protests, who have partaken in peaceful encampments and have been doxxed, harassed. They've lost jobs, they've been kicked out of their schools. And even on a national scale, we saw the shooting of 3 Palestinian men in Vermont, and a woman in Texas tried to drown 2 Palestinian babies. So right now, we're under fire from all directions, whether it be our government or bigots here who simply just don't wish to see us here.
What does it say that, you know, that this has kind of become a political issue, but in reality, I mean, if any of this stuff was happening where Russia was dropping bombs on hospitals, if Russia was dropping bombs on markets, refugee camps, I mean, a lot of the same politicians saying nothing now in both parties would be calling it terrorism.
Absolutely.
But it's Israel doing it, so they're kind of just, you know, putting out, I would say, platitudes.
100% they're putting out platitudes, and allow me to expand upon that more. When Russian military were targeting apartments and hospitals in Ukraine, it was met with outrage by Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and the United States was quick to enact sanctions. They called it terrorism. When Israel has bombed schools, hospitals, mosques, and has even attacked some of the oldest churches in Gaza, it is met with deafening silence within the halls of Congress. They view this as Israel defending itself. But I have a question to ask the world. Are you defending yourself when you're killing women and children? This is not self-defense, this is barbarism. It is barbarism. And we as Palestinians, as Arabs and Muslims, we feel less than human when we hear our government rightfully condemn Russian war crimes, but yet turn around and say nothing to the similar crimes that Israel has inflicted upon the Palestinian population in Gaza. When's this going to end? When's there going to be a change of the tide? When will Congress, our president, and the entire political apparatus see us as humans?
It struck me earlier in the week, I'm sure you saw that there was Israeli soldiers that were put under arrest at what seems like a torture camp. I don't know what else to call it. But for allegedly sodomizing a detainee, sticking something up the detainee's rectum. There was bleeding and other horrific evidence that this detainee was tortured. And in response, really right-wing, extremists stormed into this camp, the IDF camp, and tried to stop the arrests.
Yes.
I did not hear anything about it. No condemnation from President Biden, Vice President Harris. They say that this is the democracy in the Middle East, yet active ministers are storming in to try and stop the arrest of soldiers who are being arrested for allegedly torturing detainees. I mean, what does that say to you, that they're quick to say Israel has a right to defend itself, but they're not condemning what seems like, basically allowing soldiers to sodomize detainees?
Well, it really does highlight the lack of invisibility that Palestinians have right now within our country. But even more so, I really want people to know and understand this. Since the Nakba in 1948, up until present day, part of the Israeli project has been predicated upon brutal physical and sexual violence of Palestinians. What we saw at that death camp, I call it, at that torture camp, is not a one-off instance. This is a systemic, reoccurring, known policy within the Israeli government to torture not just Palestinian men this way, but Palestinian boys, Palestinian girls, Palestinian women. We've heard of horrific instances of innocent Palestinian women in Gaza being detained and forced to strip in front of their family members. This is not anything new. And the State Department has heard of these claims. I'm sure you've heard what happened with Josh Paul when he resigned from the State Department, when he raised issue and took alarm with the fact that the IDF was sodomizing a Palestinian boy. How did the Israelis respond? They went and they shuttered that same organization, accused it of being a terrorist organization. Israel will always have the back of the United States, no matter what. If 40,000 dead Palestinians aren't enough, if 2 million people are being displaced is not enough, then what will be enough? What is it that we can give the world that we have not already given them? So it's not surprising to see such a massive media blackout regarding the sexual abuse of Palestinians, because they have obfuscated and whitewashed other Israeli crimes. So it's no shock to see that they've taken such a nonchalant and uncaring position on the issue.
And what are your thoughts? Again, can't speak for all of the community here, but you hear all the time from, Zionists, pro-Israel Jews, the Palestinians, they were offered their own state in 48 and 67, and they jot down all these years. And each time it wasn't enough, yada, yada, yada. From my conversations, I haven't had many, but from my conversations with protesters, Arab Americans, they're not against Israel existing, or they're not against even having two states, but they're not really comfortable accepting crumbs, and they also want the right to return. So if this ends, are people in this community okay with a Palestinian state that lives next to an Israeli state? What are people looking for?
What people are looking for is for Palestinians to have the same rights and same freedom and same dignity as their Israeli Jewish counterparts. Whether it be a two-state solution, which is a popular, touted policy by the global community here in the U.S., or a singular democratic state with Israel in which Palestinians and Israelis enjoy equal rights. The issue here is not the existence of a Jewish state. The issue is how this state maintains its existence, and it's maintained upon the degradation of Palestinians. As you said, we don't want crumbs. Pull up a map of the West Bank. There is no contiguous landmass for a Palestinian state. It's bisected by settlements. It's bisected by checkpoints. There's segregated enclaves, communities broken up from one another. There's no way you can have a state like that. How would you feel if you lived in Michigan, but Ohio dictated your borders and told you how to move, where to go, where to eat, enacted curfews? That's the situation in the West Bank right now. We have an occupying power controlling every single move we make. We will only enjoy a two-state solution as if there's a right of return, all the illegal settlements out of the West Bank, and Palestinians have East Jerusalem as their capital. Anything less than this is unacceptable, because Because right now the political reality is this. There is no reality in which a two-state solution is possible without all those things. So that's why you hear some people say, why not just have a state for all, in which the Palestinians can vote and share the land equally with their Israeli counterparts. But they don't want that because they're so committed to the idea that Israeli Jews are better than any Arab, Palestinian, or Muslim, or even Christian that lives in that land.
For a Palestinian-American, I mean, when you hear politicians putting forth these themes of freedom, meanwhile, nobody could move in Gaza, or where you're told to move to safety, you're being hit with missiles and bombs on the way, or then when you get there to the safe zone, you're told you got to go, keep moving. I mean, what are your thoughts on that theme of freedom compared in context of what's happening?
I would say freedom for we, but not thee, right? So only a certain groups of people in the world, or here in the U.S., can have freedom. Israelis could have freedom, but Palestinians can't have freedom. Israelis can have freedom, but the citizens of Lebanon can have freedom. The Israelis can have freedom, but the citizens of Yemen or the citizens of Iraq or Syria can't have freedom whatsoever. What is freedom? Define freedom for me. Is freedom only for people that subscribe and adhere to this neoliberal outlook on the world? Because it seems to me that every president, whether it be Trump or Biden or their predecessors, that says, if you adopt our way of thinking, you'll be safe, but if you don't, then we'll kill you. So what is freedom? What do you constitute as freedom? The freedom to kill those who don't agree with you? And then the freedom to shield those from persecution that do? Because that doesn't sound like freedom. That sounds like draconian authoritarianism that must be confronted.
I mean, where does this go from here? Because honestly, I don't know if this conflict will end in our lifetime, but in terms of America, it seems like we're over a tipping point. Mm-hmm. This issue for many years, obviously Palestinian-Americans in Dearborn cared, but it was kind of, for the most part, a side issue. There were activists, but there weren't these large protests. Mm-hmm. But I think the genie's out of the bottle. Yeah. I think people aren't just going to go back to not being active about this. Even if there is a ceasefire, where does this issue go from here? Because obviously this has become an animating issue for young people, for progressives, even older people. Where do you see the kind of pro-Palestinian movement, whether it be two-state solution or one democratic state? Where do you see this movement going even after this current carnage ends?
Well, I think particularly here for the Palestinian diaspora in the United States and, of course, the broader Arab and Muslim community, we're not going to relent on the topic of Palestine. We're going to make sure that both political parties, particularly Democrats, hear us on this. But I think this is also why there's an uncommitted movement, is because Democrats have long championed the idea of Palestinian rights, but have seemingly regurgitated and followed the footsteps of their neoconservative, hawkish Republican counterparts. So the whole point of this is that we want to send a message that you can no longer sidestep the issue. Where does the movement go from here? Well, I think that kind of depends on a lot of other issues that happened in Palestine itself. What's the Palestinian polity going to look like? Are Hamas and Fatah going to form a unified government? What's going to be the fabric, the makeup of that government? What's going to be their demands? An ideological outlook that's going to have its say too, and of course on what the demands of the diaspora here will be. But more importantly, I think the whole world now is pro-Palestine, not just here in America, or even here in Michigan or in Dearborn. There is no possible way in the future you could be a president of the United States or try to campaign to be president of the United States in some way, shape, or form try to dismiss Palestinian rights. Because as you said, the genie's out of the bottle. We are now, and everybody now sees how directly complicit we are in this war. There's no going back from here. Our rights are simple. Give us liberty. Give us our homeland. Let us live. Let us breathe. We don't want to fight. Palestinians don't want to die. Palestinians are sick and tired of having to fight for their freedoms. Palestinians are sick and tired of seeing their loved ones die. But this will only end when the world sees us as human beings and recognizes our rights. So the United States has a path to pick. It either forces the peace plan on the Israelis, or the Palestinians may unfortunately feel that they're going to have to force the peace plan upon the Israelis. And that may not look good. And I'm not proud saying that, but this is the truth.
Right. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.